Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Spin Reviews, and today I'm going to be talking about a new movie that just came out this past weekend, The Brothers Grimsby, or Grimsby in the UK apparently. This is the latest from Sacha Baron Cohen, and so there are two reasons why I decided to see this. One is that, pretty simply, I like Borat when that came out about a decade ago, even though I saw it a little bit later on, and I saw bits and pieces from a couple other movies he'd done since then, and generally thought that it was pretty good, if a little bit crass. But the other main reason is that I recently listened to Sacha Baron Cohen on Mark Maron's podcast, WTF, and I just got an immense amount of respect for the guy for just his work ethic and how much he commits to these crazy characters he puts on, at least with those first few movies. Because unlike those ones he broke out with, like, there isn't any of the candid, walking out into real life stuff going on. This is very much like a closed off, standard action comedy movie, which I don't have anything against. I mean, most movies don't involve people that don't know they're being filmed, so whatever, that's not really a problem. And I did go into this movie kind of optimistic, not only because of what I listened to on that podcast, but also because I kind of like the premise of this. It's not the most original thing in the world, but basically there are two brothers that grew up in the UK, got split up as little kids. One brother, Nobby, played by Sacha Baron Cohen, went out to be kind of like a regular, kind of loser guy in a poor neighborhood. And one guy grew up to be a secret agent. The guy played by, I believe, Mark Strong's his name. And I kind of like the idea of these worlds clashing, of kind of this low-down kind of comedy, and then this kind of standard action thriller kind of colliding and seeing what happens. It's not really the most original, but there are definitely a lot of possibilities you can make out of that. And in a way, it did, which I'm going to kind of get into. I'm going to talk about the positives first, and there's a reason for that. I did actually really like the action in this. If you took the comedy out, it would be a decent, if pretty typical kind of action spy thriller movie. There is a little bit of shaky cam involved, but, because a lot of it is from that iCam the spy agency provides, then, that's pretty easy to overlook. And I did kind of like the premise of the overall conflict of it, of, like, supposedly philanthropist celebrity, played by Penelope Cruz, I believe, who's actually hatching kind of an evil plan to poison everyone in the world that's not obviously useful. This is gonna have maybe minor spoilers in it, but the plot of the movie is pretty predictable in a lot of spots, honestly, so I don't really think you're missing all that much. And I did like the way that Sacha Baron Cohen and Mark Strong played off each other as these total polar opposites. Again, it's kind of typical odd couple kind of situation, a straight man and dumb guy. But the thing that kind of brings them together and how they kind of wind up bonding and getting along was something that I could kind of go along with for most of the movie. Here's the thing, though. So far, I've talked about the action being good. I've talked about the story being good. I've talked about the characters being pretty decent. You know what I haven't talked about in this comedy? The comedy. And that's where this movie fails so hard. This is just so fascinating, and I've thought about it more and more as I walked home from the movie theater, that I've never seen a comedy do everything else so well except the comedy. Like, the jokes in this movie fall flat so hard a lot of the time. There wasn't really a lot of laughing. A lot of what the reaction in the movie theater was kind of similar to me. It was like, a few minutes go by, and then just go and learn, like, you get a little smirk, and then, like, maybe one kind of belly laugh, maybe halfway through, and then one, like, oh my god, because there was a big gross out thing. But this movie misses way more often than it hits in the joke department. And that's because it's just kind of typical gross out humor. Something that was in the news, there was a joke that Donald Trump got AIDS, and it was kind of a small thing in sort of the end. Wasn't really that big a deal unless you're really sensitive about that kind of stuff, I suppose. Like, for example, easily the grossest joke in this movie, and I know I'm kind of spoiling, but whatever, it doesn't really matter. Nobby and Sebastian have to hide from, like, the agency that is trying to hunt them down, and they find elephants because they're in South Africa. and how he gets the idea that they go inside of an elephant's rectum. That's already kind of gross enough, and you're like, buttholes and all that. But then they just take it to the nth degree by having another elephant, walk up to it with its big elephant dick and start having sex with the elephant that they're in. And it's just really unpleasant. See, I don't have a problem with gross out comedy. I mean, like, I like the first couple American Pie movies okay, and the Deadpool movie from just recently, like, that had a couple kind of gross out stuff in it, but I thought that was pretty good. The only thing is that it's not funny by itself. Like, oh, they're in a butthole and they get a penis close to them. Dicks and butts are automatically funny to people over 12, right? He came off like such like a smart guy and on that podcast. I mean, he wasn't like joking every other second, but he sounded like he puts a ton of work into what he does and has this kind of crazy work ethic, and just the writing does not reflect that in the slightest. What I saw on that podcast that I think informs my thoughts on this movie is that what he said that what he wanted to do with the Brothers Grimsby was make an action movie and then put this dumb guy in it. But I think the problem is that they got this action director, and he did, his job really well. They got this action actor, this action movie guy, Mark Strong, who did a really good job, and Sacha Baron Cohen with his decade of work. He played off him pretty well, like I said before, but they just forgot the jokes. And they just kind of came up with the most extreme stuff they could on the spot and hoped it would get enough O's to get a pass from people. But no, this is a weird thing to say about a comedy, but it would have been better if it was just a typical action movie, because at least I could walk out of that and say like, oh, that was an entertaining way to kill an hour and a half. There's so many jokes here that are just like, oh, that girl is fat, and that's it. And it's like, oh, fat girl is having sex with him. Oh, it's funny because she's fat, and there's nothing else. I usually like to think that I have a discerning eye for picking the movies that I see, which is why, like, last year, there wasn't anything I saw that was worse than Minions, and even that was serviceable. But, yeah, I was not really a fan of the final result of this. Like, the general vibe of, like, how the characters interact stuff is very distinctly British. From what I see, like, you can tell that it was mostly made for the British audience and then just kind of moved to America because, because Americans like saying my wife a lot. But oddly enough, this movie is a lot of, like, the worst things about the American sense of humor. I feel like there could be a lot more clever dialogue, or just stuff other than just sex-related things, and, like, curse words said by kids are automatically comedic gold. And yeah, I'm sad by this. I've been rambling. I'm gonna try to edit this down as much as I can. As much as I really want to give this movie a lot of credit, the end result is something that I just walked away from shaking my head. So I'm gonna give it a 5.5 out of 10. If you guys have seen this movie, what did you think about it? Do you agree with what I had to say here? Do you disagree and think there is a lot more merit in here? Share this around with anyone who might be interested. Like the Facebook page in the description for updates, and hopefully you'll see you in the next episode of Spin It Reviews. Bye.